Good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to welcome you all to this joint webinar between Engineers Ireland and the National Building Control Office, which is managed by Dublin City Council. I'm Éanna O'Connell, a senior professional with the NBCO, and the National Building Control Office works on behalf of 31 building control authorities with the objective to promote a culture of compliance with the building regulations. We do this through a programme of education and training, inspections, providing compliance and support to the building control authorities, owners, builders and designers in relation to works or buildings. Our Building Control Administration System, or the BCMS, has 120,000 registered users. As building control authorities, our market surveillance authorities under the EU Construction Products Regulations and Brexit being back on the table, this office is preparing to undertake a national market surveillance role for construction products. Our office is located beside City Hall at 3 Palace Street, Dublin 2. Dublin City Council's Chief Executive, Owen Keegan, requested that the office be of the 21st century. So we operate a paperless dynamic work environment with all office systems designed to be highly mobile. The office can operate from anywhere, and since the COVID-19 lockdown, it has been business as usual. Our contact email is support@nbco.gov.ie. Today, I'm happy to introduce our team member, Richard Butler. Our other team member who is on hand to assist Richard today is Shirley Lamb, who with Sinead Quinn Phillips in Engineers Ireland are responsible for organising this webinar. The NBCO team consists of Mairead Phelan, Sabrina MacDonald, Kelda Mignon, Shirley Lamb, myself and Richard. We will have questions and answers session following Richard's presentation, time permitting. Use the question and answers feature to add to your questions throughout the webinar. If we don't have time at the end, we will collate all the questions and email the answers to all the attendees. We will launch 3 polls throughout the webinar. 2 polls just before we hand over to Richard and 1 following Richard's presentation. Each poll will be launched for 30 seconds and we'd appreciate it if you could take part. The presentation encompasses environmental issues and demonstrates how we can mitigate against climate change. Just before we hand over to Richard, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Shirley. Shirley is currently reading out the questions. And the results of the webinar you hear are Engineers Ireland 59%, Twitter Facebook was 0%, LinkedIn was 2%, and email was 19%, and other was 2% for where did you hear about this webinar. I will now go back to my colleague, Shirley Lamb.
That's great. Thanks, Aidan. I had a problem there with my audio. So we're going to hand over now to Richard Butler, who's going to do a presentation on SI number 243 of 2012, Part 3, Building Energy Ratings, Public Buildings, New and Existing Buildings for Occupation and Advertised for Sale and Letting.
Thanks, Ian and Shirley. Good afternoon, everyone. The background to Statutory Instrument 243 of 2012, Building Energy Rating, starts with Directive 2002-91-EC of the European Parliament and of the Council of the 16th of December 2002, which required Member States to ensure that when buildings are constructed, sold or rented, an energy performance certificate is made available by the person building, selling or renting to the prospective buyer or tenant, as the case may be. The certificate should be valid for a maximum of 10 years. The aims of the Energy Performance of Building Directive 2002-91-EC was to promote the improvement of energy performance of buildings, provide energy performance information and advice to building purchasers, tenants and users, enable customers to take information and advice into consideration when making any decision on property transactions, minimum energy performance standards, building energy rating BER certificates and advisory reports, display energy certificates in large public buildings, consideration of alternative energy systems, inspection of boilers, inspection of air conditioning systems. Energy Performance of Building Directive was transposed into Irish law by Statutory Instrument number 666 of 2006, European Communities Energy Performance of Buildings Regulations 2006. A person who offered for sale or letting, whether it be in writing or otherwise, on or after the 1st of January 2009, any agent acting on behalf of such person or persons in connection with such offerings are required to produce a copy of the BER certificate and advisory report in relation to the building to any person expressing an interest in purchasing or taking a letting of the building. They are also required to produce on request to the Building Control Authority in whose functional area the building is situated. It was later slightly amended by SI number 229 of 2008, European Community Energy Performance of Buildings Amendment Regulation 2008. With the introduction of Directive 2010-31-EU of the European Parliament and of the 19th of May 2010 on the energy performance of building recast, placed additional requirements on Member States, requiring that buildings having an energy performance certificate, building units in a building have an energy performance certificate, where a building unit are offered for sale or rent, the energy performance indicator or the energy performance certificate of the building or building units is stated in the advertisement in commercial media. The 2010 directive was transposed into Irish legislation, Statutory Instrument number 243 of 2012, European Union Energy Performance of Buildings Regulations 2012. The statutory instrument is divided into the following sections. Part 1, Preliminary and General. Part 2, Alternative Energy Systems. Part 3, Building Energy Rating. Part 4, Administration of Building Energy Rating Systems. Part 5, Enforcement. Part 6, Miscellaneous, and Schedules 1 to 5. Part 1, Preliminary and General. The following building categories are exempt from the regulations: national monuments, protected structures or proposed protected structures within the meaning of the Planning and Development Acts, buildings used as a place of worship or for the religious activities of any religion, temporary buildings as defined in classes 10 to 13 of the third schedule of the Building Regulations 1997, an industrial building not intended for human occupancy over extended periods and where the installed heat capacity does not exceed 10 watts per metre squared. A non-residential agricultural building where the installed heat capacity does not exceed 10 watts per metre squared. A standalone building with a total useful floor area of less than 50 square metres. Part 2, Alternative Energy Systems. Part 2 of the regulations requires a person who commissions the construction of a new building to examine the technical, environmental and economic feasibility of installing high-efficiency alternative energy systems at design stage. Part 3, Building Energy Rating. Part 3 of the regulations provides that a Building Energy Rating BER certificate be secured when, in relation to a building offered for sale or for rent after the 9th of January 2013. The regulations provide that a provisional BER certificate be secured which will be replaced by a final BER certificate on completion of construction. This part also requires that a building energy performance indicator be stated in advertisement relating to the sale or letting of the building. Buildings in excess of 500 square metres, which is frequently visited by the public, is required to display either a BER certificate or a Displayed Energy Certificate, a DEC, in a prominent place, clearly visible to the members of the public. From the 9th of January 2015, all buildings in excess of 250 square metres, frequently visited by the public, when occupied by public bodies, are also required to display an Energy Certificate, DEC, in a prominent place, clearly visible to the members of the public. Part 4, Administration of Building Energy Rating Systems. Part 4 of the regulations provides that the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland shall be responsible for the administration of the BER system, set out requirements in relation to the registration of BER assessors, the issuing of BER certificates, quality assurance, the maintenance of records, databases and documents, fees and levies, the development of code of practice for assessors, and assessor training providers. Part 5, Enforcement. Part 5 of the regulations provides for enforcement. It sets out the powers of authorised officers, the penalties that may apply to any person guilty of an offence on regulations. Part 6, Miscellaneous. Part 6 of the regulations provides that the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland may take such steps as are necessary to promote, advise to the users of heat and air conditioning systems in accordance with alternative approaches set out in Article 14.4 and 15.4 and by extension Article 16 of the Directive. What is BER, Building Energy Rating? It is calculated using the DEEP or NEEP software. DEEP is the Dwelling Energy Assessment Procedure and NEEP is Non-Domestic Energy Assessment Procedure. BER scales in kilowatt per hour per metre squared per year, ratings A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, etc. CO2 indicators in kilograms per metre squared per year. Part 3, Building Energy Rating. Section 10, Issuing of BER Certificate for Dwellings. Section 11, Issuing of BER Certificate for Buildings Other than Dwellings. Section 12, Advertisement of BERs. Section 13, Producing of a BER Certificate for a Building Control Authority. Section 14, Public Buildings, and Section 15, Offences. Advertisement requirements, Section 12, Advertisement of BERs. Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland has published a BER advertisement requirement guideline, which is available to download from www.seai.ie. SI number 243 of 2012 defines advertisement in relation to a building energy rating means a public announcement in or on newspapers, magazines, brochures, leaflets, advertisement notices, vehicles, radio, television, internet, and direct mail, in such other forms as may be prescribed in guidance provided by the issuing authority. The BER advertisement requirement guidelines provide guidance on how to comply with each advertisement media. BER advertisement requirement guideline consists of 4 sections. Section 1, General Application Guidelines, which sets out the requirements that apply to advertisements. Section 2, BER advertisement requirement guidelines, which sets out the design and appearance of the BER information. Section 3, Medium Specific Guidelines, which sets out the BER information required for different advertisement media. Section 4, Appendices, gives some essential definitions and extracts from SI 243 of 2012 European Union Energy Performance of Building Regulation 2012. Section 2, BER Advertisement Requirement Guidelines, sets out the design and appearance of the BER information, font, text size, location, spacing, colours, etc. The typeface used in the BER alphanumeric rating motifs are: BER title is Helvetica LT Standard Bold. Alphanumeric scale is Helvetica LT Standard Bold. Examples of letter font and sizes and colours are shown in the slide. Section 3, Medium Specific Guidelines, set out the BER information required for different advertisements: BER motif, BER alphanumeric rating, BER number, and energy performance indicator, EPI. Simply put, larger ads equate to more information being provided. Newspapers, magazines, display advertisements apply to any paid advertisement in print media, newspapers, magazines, fresh sheets, etc. Where there is a graphical element included in the advertisement, or where there is a pictorial representation of the property, then the BER should be represented using BER identity guidelines. Sale, rental display boards, advertisement notices apply to display boards placed on or outside a property, specifically associated with its sale or rental, where sign is customized to include property-specific details. BER exempt property advertisements. BER exempt property advertisements should follow the general guidelines as denoted in section 3.1 to 3.4 of the BER advertisement requirement guidelines document. Section 15, Offences. A person who contravenes any provision of this part of the regulations is guilty of an offence. Proceedings for an offence under this part may be brought and prosecuted by the Building Control Authority within whose functional area the dwelling or building other than a dwelling is located. Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland SEAI function. SEAI are responsible for the day-to-day administration of the BER system and have separate enforcement powers as authorised officers under the regulation in respect of their functions. The enhanced visibility of energy rating that will arise from the advertisement requirements and display requirements may assist building control authorities in adopting more streamlined enforcement procedures. The establishment of an administration arrangement to scan property supplements in newspapers and magazines, coupled with a random examination of various property websites periodically, should readily identify incidents of non-compliance, thereby facilitating more targeted enforcement going forward. Building Control Authority's function. Enforcement of the above aspects of the building regulations is the responsibility of the local Building Control Authority. Building Control Authority delegated officers may take such steps as are reasonably necessary for the purpose of verifying compliance with the regulations. Such steps may typically include requesting copies of BER certificates and advisory reports from building owners or from any agents they may have engaged to act on their behalf, example, auctioneers. The National Building Control Office, what are we doing? The National Building Control Office has issued letters regarding compliance with SEI guidelines to all national newspapers and national property websites. We are carrying out random inspections of paper ads and websites to see if SEI guidelines are being followed and issuing letters regarding non-compliance. Building control officers, what are they doing? Issuing letters regarding non-compliance, random inspection of auctioneers' windows to see if SEI guidelines are being followed, also inspection of advertisements on auctioneers' websites, newspaper ads, signs and sites. Compliance requests by building control officers using Section 11.3 requests under the Building Control Acts in relation to new dwelling commencement stage, Part L, compliance advisory report and provisional BER certificates using DEEP software. In relation to new dwellings completion stage, before it is occupied, a final BER certificate using DEEP software and detailed calculation sheets, Part L compliance report, are to be submitted to demonstrate compliance with the necessary standard. In relation to new buildings other than dwellings, commencement stage, Part L compliance advisory report and provisional BER using the NEEP software. In relation to new buildings other than dwellings completed stage before it is occupied, a final BER certificate using NEEP software and detailed calculation sheets are to be submitted to demonstrate compliance with the necessary standard. Display energy certificates, DEC, ensuring that buildings in excess of 250 square meters frequently visited by the public when occupied by public bodies display an energy certificate, DEC, in a prominent place clearly visible to the members of the public. Building energy rating BER. BER must be produced by a registered BER assessor using the DEEP or NEEP software only. BER is valid for 10 years unless changes are made to the building. The BER is independent of how the occupants behave in the building. An advisory report must accompany a BER certificate. As a final point, Regulation 29 of the European Union Energy Performance of Building Regulation 2012 provides the basis for the appointment of authorised officers, while Regulation 30 sets out broad powers of enforcement. In this context, building control authorities are strongly encouraged to ensure that warrants of appointment in respect of their authorised officers are in order and are advised that such warrants of appointment may need to be reissued under Regulation 29 of the new European Union Energy Performance of Building Regulation 2012. That concludes my presentation. I will hand back to Shirley to ask our last poll question.
Thanks for that, Richard. I'm going to launch now the last of our poll questions. You will now see it on your screen. What topic would you like to see NBCO and Engineers Ireland present on in future webinars? BCMS submission process, building regulation, Building Control Act or enforcement? As before, you have 30 seconds to answer. So the results of the poll are 7% would like BCMS submission process, 64% building regulations, 9% Building Control Act and 20% enforcement. We are now going to commence our Q&A segment of the webinar. So just let me see what questions we have in. So Richard, a question from Paddy Lynch here. Has any LA Building Control Authority ever prosecuted anyone for not having a BER on a rental or sale non-compliance?
Not currently, but the Building Control Authority have issued warning letters
Okay. The next question, do you need to submit to building control a provisional BER at commencement stage?
You're required to submit a Part L compliance report at commencement stage to get a valid commencement notice. A provisional BER is generated along with that notice.
That's great, thanks Richard. And we had one other question from Mark Costello saying, will presentations be available on the NBCO website? So the answer to that is they will be available on our YouTube channel. So when they're uploaded, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you get a notification anytime any new content is added. So if anybody else has any questions, if they want to write in, we've actually one more. What is the level of compliance with display energy certificate requirements?
We wouldn't have that data. We're actually collecting all that data on a quarterly basis now as part of all the inspection data by local building control authorities.
Okay, thanks Richard. Anybody else got any questions? If so, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And if you can't think of any questions now, you can email into support@nbco.gov.ie with any questions. And what we will do, we'll collate all questions and circulate them to all attendees of today's webinar. So one more question here for you, Richard. Does a registered BER assessor need to produce the provisional BER, or can an engineer do this?
No, it needs to be a registered BER assessor.
Okay. That's great. Thanks, Richard. So that looks like it's the last of the questions. No more questions from any attendees. So as I said, if you think of anything that you'd like to ask, email into support and we will circulate all the Q&A to attendees of today's webinar. I'm now going to hand over to Aina, who will close out and tell us about future webinars that are coming up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Shirley. The NBCO and Engineers Ireland thanks all for your attendance today. Note, members of Engineers Ireland will gain 1 CPD hour for this webinar. Also, I'd like to thank Sinead Quinn-Phillips from Engineers Ireland, Richard Butler and Shirley Lamb from the NBCO for organising this webinar and giving of their time. I would remind everyone that Richard's presentation shows us how we can combat against climate change and protect the environment. In relation to the upcoming webinars that we will be presenting, the first one is the application of Part L of the building regulations to energy retrofit, extensions and renovations of existing dwellings and other buildings by Pat Nestor, who is the Head of Building Control in Dublin City Council, on the 27th of August. Then we are hosting a joint webinar with the Housing Agency where Richard Butler will give the NBCO's perspective on the future of building control on the 15th of September. And then we will also have a webinar on EU construction product regulations, market surveillance and Brexit by Mairead Phelan on the 29th of September. I'd also remind people in relation to our links and so forth, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at NBCO Ireland for details about future events and subscribe to your YouTube channel. NBCO DCC for help videos on the BCMS and the NBCO presentations. And if Shirley, if you would allow a screen share for a moment, please. I would direct people also to our website, and on the website, localgov.ie, you will notice at the bottom of the page we have useful links and documents. And we would have frequently loaded frequently asked questions, which we have quite a number of them there, containing a lot of information regarding building control and the BCMS. And we also have on localgov.ie, which may be of note to you, a quarterly newsletter. And in this newsletter, for example, we would have the most recent one being quarter 1 of 2020. It's quite a nice piece of information where you can read and find out what we are doing, what building control authorities are doing, and what's happening in the sector. So again, that's all useful information to have. So on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance today, and goodbye and take care.